about market value to the level that someone talked to them about it. So especially with startups, if you're a startup and you're a startup founder, no one, and you've never worked in HR or you've never had an HR person explain to you about comp strategy, you have no clue what any of these things mean. And it's a highly complicated topic. So you might just be doing your best to pay people as fairly as you think they should be being paid. And so I am a little bit of an optimist. I believe in good in the world for the most part. And I think a lot of times there's confusion or like issues of, below market value or unfair comp strategy. I honestly believe a lot of times is it because of not having the education or knowledge, because no one's talking about it. No one's talking about it with employers, just like no one's talking about it around the dinner table. So it's very much a taboo subject, even in business. So again, it's one of the reasons I'm very passionate about talking about it and kind of bringing that business side to light. But just remember, when you're talking to your bosses, your HR person, they only know what they know and they don't know what they don't know. So just putting that in context of what this all means for that business side of things. As well, again, really removing that emotion from salary and the business side is really, really key. Cool. So WTF, comp strategy. There's a buzzword. Awesome. So comp strategy is essentially the intentional or unintentional way in which a company approaches how comp is initially decided, reviewed, and awarded, and is often dictated by the financial position of the business. So ultimately, at the end of the day, whether they meant to or not, they have some kind of way of awarding, deciding, that sort of thing around comp. So depending how educated they are, depending how intentional they are, that could all change things. So I wanted to give you a couple examples of what a comp strategy could look like and how different they can be with each businesses. So one comp strategy, actually, I know there's a very large company in town. There's actually a couple that I know for sure. Their HR people are pretty open with their comp strategy. I'm also involved in some HR groups, so we talk about these things, which is lovely. They basically pay over market value. So there are salary surveys in tech specifically. There's a really good one that HR people contribute to. You have to pay for them. So if you don't have the means to buy them, you don't get that information. But they essentially know what kind of the average employer in Vancouver pays, and they purposely pay 25% more. But they do so knowing that they expect a lot out of their people. They overwork them, things like overtime. They have a very lovely office with all of the things. You never really have to go home, that kind of Silicon Valley burnout culture, as that's kind of being called out now. But they will pay you a very huge amount, and they don't expect people to stay for a long time. They're a project-based company, so they kind of hope that you come on, you get excited about the company, you get excited about the pay, and you work your butt off, and you gain great experience, and then you leave and take that experience somewhere else because it's not sustainable. Very few people can kind of keep up with the pace of this company. So that's their comp strategy. They overpay, but in exchange, they expect high turnover. It's a complete legit way to do business. They plan their recruitment and all their other processes to make that work for them. The other kind of company that's really common is the broke startup. So this is a startup founder that's really passionate, has a really great idea, and just doesn't have the money. So they're trying to get creative with their employees. They're paying what they can. They're giving equity. They are, kind of saying, hey, get involved now in the early stage. We're going to be this great big thing. They usually hand out very large titles. So you're someone that comes in with a couple years experience and all of a sudden you're the VP of sales. And eventually you might even have some people to manage really quickly. So you can kind of gain experience really fast, maybe faster than in a big company. You're learning a lot on your own, but they're smaller and they just don't physically have the cash to pay you. So they tend to, they're under market value per se, but maybe they try to award with more flexibility or those stock options and things like that. Again, totally legit comp strategy that works for that business. And if they can get people to agree to work for them and the company is doing well, then that works too. Awesome. The other comp strategy might be a very junior heavy company. And this is where that idea of internal equity comes in. So when I worked at Lighthouse Labs, we had a lot of people starting as junior developers. And sometimes, we saw ranges. We saw some people starting at $40,000 per year. We saw some people starting at $60,000 a year as a junior developer. And one time I had someone kind of get frustrated because they really felt they were worth $50,000 a year and the employer was offering them 45. And they were like, they're undervaluing me. They're trying to exploit junior talent. Like they just went to this really negative, dark place. And I kind of knew that employer and I knew that they had a few of the students from Lighthouse Labs in the past. And what it was is that they brought all of those people on for $45,000 a year. So they had 3 people that they'd hired maybe a year ago. So as an employer, that idea of internal equity, yes, you might think you're worth $50,000 a year. And yes, another company would gladly pay you that. That is very much in line with market value. But I already have 6 junior devs working for me who started before you who are still at $45,000 a year, or maybe they just got a bump to say $48,000 a year. How do I justify bringing you on board for $50,000 a year? I have a whole other team to think about in regards to those, adding those positions. And the same thing can go to promotions and raises kind of while you work there. Again, if there's a whole team and everyone's making the same amount, or maybe your manager is making a certain amount, how do I justify your raise to make more than your manager, per se, as an example? So those things called internal equity get really complicated and can make the comp strategy a complicated one. But again, some of the reasoning behind why you might hear either no to a negotiation when you're just looking for a new job, or you might even hear no, or you might not get the number you want. It all comes down to that comp strategy and some of those factors. Cool. The other aspect, as I mentioned, kind of what comp is to a business, is the value of your role. So a junior dev or a project manager or an admin manager is not the same at all companies. It's really the value of your role. So some examples where a role may be more or potentially less valuable is the specialist role. So if, say, I'm a project manager and my experience is working in healthcare, so I have a ton of experience working in healthcare, and I'm looking for a new job. Well, there's lots of healthcare startups out there. There's lots of tech healthcare out there right now. My skill set, specifically coming from healthcare, which is a very niche market, it tends to be government, it's highly regulated, not everyone has experience in it, is really, really valuable as a marketing person. So my experience having that healthcare background is more valuable than the person coming in just as a general marketing person who maybe worked in advertising or maybe worked for a couple different companies. So therefore, either me in the role or me negotiating at the beginning of the role, it's a reason I might get paid more, or potentially, if you're on the other side, get paid less than that other person, because my skills really matter to that company at that time, coming from that industry background, that sort of thing. The other thing that happens a lot is it roles. New roles exist. So if we think about it, 20 years ago, there weren't really social media managers out there too much. And now it's a very popular role. So there was a time when social media management was becoming a thing, that there was a lag in the skills that people had with the jobs available. And we see that with developers and a lot of tech jobs right now, really tech specific jobs. So for a while, there was probably a period of a couple years where social media managers were high in demand, but there weren't very many people skilled in that. Their schools weren't teaching it yet. The market wasn't really matching up. So if you happened to be a social media manager in that time, when it was a really hot, hard position to find that every company needed to have on their org chart, you probably were commanding more salary than a social media manager now with the same number of years experience. And that's just that kind of market supply and demand. That's a very real thing when it comes to jobs, and it happens. And it actually really complicates things when people get in those jobs, because all of a sudden, say you have a social media manager who they were the hot position when you hired them at $80,000 a year. 3 years later, you need to hire, now they're making 90 or 100 because they've been promoted a couple of times, and you need to hire someone else. You have this really expensive person on your org chart that's really valuable, but in reality, you probably could find their exact same skill set for cheaper in the future. So it gets really hard and complicated. And that's actually a term called salary compression, where you have too many people making kind of too much money and newer people coming underneath them are making less, or vice versa, where the newer people are making more than the older people because their roles became the hot roles. And it's complicated. It just messes things up, all to show how complicated salaries can be. We talked a little about the internal equity in the team, how it matters, like who else on the team and how much they're making and where you compare to them and how do you balance that fairness aspect. And then also institutional knowledge and additional skills. So when you're in a company, so that, that social media manager who's very highly paid and maybe out of range for a equitable comp strategy or market value, how valuable are those institutional knowledge, what they know about the company? That becomes hugely valuable and a huge negotiation leverage point when you're negotiating a raise. So if you've been with a company for 5-6 years, you know everything about the company, not just your department, you help out in all these other areas, you become more valuable and potentially worth more money to the company in your role. Than maybe someone whose role is a little bit more clear cut, they're a little bit more in the box, and they've been there less time than you or the same amount of time with you, or maybe even longer, but they just, their knowledge level is a little bit less than yours. So all to say, if there's some good opportunities to make yourself really valuable for salary negotiations in the future throughout your career, but these are all aspects that companies consider when they're trying their best, and if they're a good company, when they're trying their best to set some rules around how to approach salary, come up with their comp strategy, that sort of thing. So just to give you some context, salary is really complex, and sometimes it really frustrates me when I see things on social media or blog posts where they just, it's clear to me it's not necessarily someone who understands the behind the scenes. Maybe it's someone who's been very successful in negotiating their own salary throughout their career, and you should listen to those people for sure. But it sometimes gets reduced that it's super easy and super simple, and that if an employer isn't giving these huge raises, or they've said no to somebody, that it's this malicious kind of intent behind it. And all to say that, sure, that could be the case. I'm not saying that every employer is a good person out there, but overall, salary is a really complex thing. And even for people who are professionals, HR professionals and that sort of thing, it's a very specialized skill to be a comp specialist. And there's very few of us out there. I'm not a comp specialist by any means. So it's very, very challenging for employers, and it can be approached differently by every employer. So your experience with your employer today might be different than your experience in regards to negotiating salary in the future, because of the so many factors that influence salary and how a company deals with it. Cool. So questions on kind of what it means to a business. What happens? What does the CFO and the HR director talk about when it comes to comp time? Any questions like that?
Solid point. And while we're waiting for questions to come in, some of my own comments as well. So when we think about comp, we are also not only thinking about the cold hard cash in terms of salary, but Charlene also alluded to some of the other things, right? So as you start to think about what you want to negotiate or how you want to negotiate, some of the other things include equity, which you mentioned, shares, stock options, and there is a difference between shares and stock options. We can go into that later if anyone's wondering. Commission, revenue share, let's say tuition or training reimbursement, personal development, childcare, healthcare benefits, location flexibility around work hours, mentorship. All these kind of things are all extra things that you can also consider in the discussion as you start to plan for your negotiation.
Yeah, and I do want to put it out there that you don't necessarily have to negotiate. I think there's this culture right now that if you take what's on the table, so Jay, a little bit to your question, if you take what's on the table, you left something on the table, so to speak, or you're screwing yourself over, so to speak. But it's, most companies, when they present something, or, they say, we would like to give you 3 weeks vacation, they do it because that's what they've given everybody, so to speak. So there isn't necessarily room to negotiate for the sake of negotiation. And I believe you can always ask, and we'll talk about how to ask in the right ways and that sort of thing. But also, when you hear no, it could just because, that's the standard, right? Again, that internal equity of like, you can ask for more vacation, but everyone else in the company only has 3 weeks. So why am I giving you 4 weeks just because you asked? You can ask for sure, and you should, but just know that it's not everything's up for negotiation. There isn't this idea of like, oh, we expect you to negotiate. We kind of do and we kind of don't. It really depends on the situation. If you're new, if you're junior, if you're just starting your career, I don't expect you to negotiate very much. It actually can be a bit off-putting because I have a pretty standard package. Your first job, it's pretty standard. You don't have a lot of room to negotiate. When you're a senior, when I job hunt, I don't really like negotiating. So I kind of just try to be upfront about what my salary expectations are right in the interview process. And then if they don't come to them, then I just push really for that number. I try to remove all the games, but I've got 15 years experience, and I've got some of that specialized skills, especially in the startup scene and in tech, that not every other HR person has. So that's kind of how I approach that.
Yeah, no, thanks for clarifying. And by raising them, I'm not intending that you should negotiate all of those points, just letting people think about all of those as well.
Yeah.
For sure, I myself, when it comes to my own salary, I also don't typically get too granular. Like when you start to get too picky and too calculative, then people will start to think that, maybe it's not worth the hassle of bringing this person on board as well. Right. So,
yeah. Cool. Any other questions on this before we move on? Oh, okay. All right. So preparing to ask for the raise. Cool. So first, prepare by ensuring you're prepared. So this section talks mostly about if you're already in a company, and we can talk a little bit about what to do if you're applying for jobs and in that negotiation phase at the end. Cool. So I believe getting curious is the key to life. So really just get curious about how all that stuff that I talked about works at your company so that you can arm yourself with the information you need to appropriately ask the right questions and ask for your raise in the right way and up your chances of it being awarded to you. So asking questions like how, when, how often is comp reviewed? Is my review the right time to talk about comp? So there is a trend right now in HR to decouple performance reviews from comp. So don't assume that you have a performance review coming up, that is the appropriate time to talk about comp. So asking those questions, who should I talk to? When should I talk about my career growth? So that you have some idea. You can ask those questions very early on. And if you're curious, as opposed to presumptuous, most people will give you those answers and they're happy to do so. How do I throw my name in the hat for that open position if you're looking for that promotion or someone just left? So, it doesn't mean, hey, I really want a gun for so-and-so's job that just left, or are you guys hiring that person? You just ask the question like, hey, if I was interested in that kind of position or in the future, how do I go about doing that in this company? What are the appropriate channels? Asking what is the overall comp philosophy in the company is a fair question. And when you ask for in that kind of curious way, you'll often get the answers you need. And so it's really, like I said, understanding that comp process. So review periods and timing. So that's another thing too, is comp comes down to budgets, right? We talked about that spreadsheet, that budget, the fact that there's an annual budget, the fact that they have to report to board members and are financially responsible for their numbers. So there is a time that works to award a raise and there's times that don't. So you need to understand how that works so you can ask at the right times. Also understanding who makes the decisions and the amount. So at CTO.ai, we let the managers advocate. We like them to be advocates. They know the performance of their staff really well. So what they do is they actually tell us who they would like to they have kind of three options. We give a raise every year. A cost of living raise, it's like 3 to 5%. It's kind of budgeted for. So kind of there's that option. Option number two is you have someone who's really high performing. So they've exceeded our expectations. It's been, a crazy year and they've really risen to the occasion. And we call that a performance increase. And that can be a higher percentage. And then the third is we're talking about those people who are really, their job description no longer matches with the actual work they're doing. And that's kind of a promotion raise. And what we have to do is we actually have to get board approval. So we go every year and we say, we want to budget up to 10% or 15% or maybe 30% if we're so lucky on salary comp, on raises. So we actually have to get approval with that budget and they can say, nope, you can only do 10%. And then we have a pool of money and a pot of money to work with. And we get our managers to tell us, to make recommendations of who should get what. But the manager doesn't say this person gets $5,000, this person gets $10,000, this person gets $15,000. They just put them in that bucket that they feel that they would like to advocate for. And then myself and the CFO, who see all of the salaries, who look at a market value salary survey, then decide who gets 10, 15, whatever. And we try to make it equitable because there's just different teams and we want to make sure things are as equitable as possible. So that's an example of how the manager makes the decision to advocate for your raise or your promotion. They don't necessarily get a say in the final number. And in some places, the manager has all of that power and ability. So it really just depends. So again, getting curious helps you understand the comp process and who to talk to. And then regarding promotions, again, you want to understand like what you're asking for and where that's coming from at that time. So are you already doing the role versus wanting the role? That's two different types of promotions. One's a bigger ask than the other. If your role's changed in 6 months because people have quit and you've risen up and now you're managing 3 people that you weren't managing before, that's a very different conversation than you're not technically managing anyone, but you'd like to one day and you'd like to become a manager. Those are two different asks. So just being reflective on that. And then being honest with yourself for those promotions. Are you ready for that role? Is there a role actively open? Do they need that role, right? So if a business doesn't need a manager, you're not managing anyone currently, you can still ask and be like, hey, any thought of me managing these 3 people, and maybe present what that might look like. But the business might say, man, we don't really need that. And we don't need you managing. And again, that's okay. That's the business putting the business's needs. And then they might, hopefully, we'll talk to you about what growth could look like in the future and yada, yada. But that's just an idea of some of those things, those questions. Get curious. You're going to arm yourself with more information to ask in the proper way. So then the second, once you have the information of how it all works and have asked yourself those questions, is prepare your business case. Ultimately, you're asking, why should I give you a raise or promotion? So if you think of it like a business transaction, Show your understanding of the company's process. You have an understanding when's the right time. Don't ask if they've told you raises are awarded in April. Don't ask for it in December, or maybe just plant the seed and say, I'd like to ask for it come April, but you don't kind of go in with your big presentation in December, calling a meeting to talk about a raise. That's not going to happen. And then that you understand your role or how your desired role impacts the business. Again, it's an exchange for services. So you're asking for your price for your service to go up. So what is the business getting for that more expensive price? So your business case that you have to present and put together is essentially, one, I have performed better in my role than was expected, and here's how. And or I now bring more value to my role, department, company than my current salary reflects, and here's how. And or I'm now doing duties in my role or could be doing duties in my role that better serve the company, and here's how. That's the essence of your business case that you're presenting. So in preparing for your how to ask for a raise, essentially you're preparing to share things like your accomplishments and achievements. Be very specific. So in sales, you definitely want to say, hey, I overachieved by X amount of dollars. I brought in more money. I brought in these clients. The expectation was X and I achieved Y. Be as specific as possible. Also talk about your unique or enhanced skill set. So at C2.ai, for example, I was supposed to be doing HR for a 60-person company. I guarantee my job would have been very HR focused with a 60-person company. I'm now doing a ton of different things. I'm leaning into my early stage startup experience and all that sort of stuff. Now, I don't necessarily know if that's more valuable than the HR experience they hired me for, but it's a good example of these other skills and specialist skills I brought to the table that have become more relevant now than they were when they first hired me. So good opportunity to have some conversations and get curious, as well as your commitment to learning, growing, and the business. And that's the big thing is you don't always have to have like made huge strides or changed your role or become some expert in the past year to warrant, a performance-based raise, a raise that's a little bit more than the standard everyone gets their 3% or their $2,000 or their small incremental amount. If you've just been a real rock and you've just hung on, you've weathered change, you've just proven yourself valuable, you have a great attitude, you have great work ethic, your commitment to the business, you become relied on, that's reason enough to ask for a little bit more of an increase, and maybe you should be valued a little bit higher. So don't downplay those kind of skills that you bring to the table. Those are great things, especially after you've been there for a couple of years and there isn't necessarily a growth position open. You can still keep growing your salary by showing your dedication to the business and your adaptability and work ethic. Great. Wait, what if I don't have a business case? What if I know I want to make more money and should make more money and don't know how? Cool. So never be afraid to get curious. So ask about how you can grow in your position. What does growth look like in your department and position? Get feedback on your performance. Ask what you can do to prepare skills-wise to ask for a raise. And just be honest. Those conversations can just be really raw and honest, and you're not necessarily having to formally present anything, but saying things to your company like, I'm eager to grow in the company. I'm really wanting a raise. I'd like to make X amount of dollars at some point in my life, or in 6 months, or in 1 year. What does that look like for me? What skills do I need to work on? What skills would I need to acquire? Where does that fit in the comp strategy here at this company? And I've been a manager at Lighthouse Labs. I had a team of 8 people across the country. And actually, I didn't get to decide salaries. It was one of those companies where I got to advocate, and the GM had a budget. And I sometimes pushed my way into getting access to that budget to have an idea, because comp is my area that I understand. But yeah, I was totally open to having those conversations. I appreciated them. And sometimes I had to say no, like, yeah, hey, guess what? If you want to make $80,000 a year, that looks like my job 3 years ago, kind of thing, or whatever. And you'd really have to be taking on X, Y, and Z. And to be honest, I see that's really hard to do in the next 12 months. So I don't know if 80,000 is in the cards 12 months from now, but if you do A, B, and C, I might be able to get you to another amount, sort of thing. And having those conversations can be really just get curious and from a business perspective, and they can be really open and transparent. And they're great. They're great to have. All right. So any questions on preparing for a raise, getting your information? I guess I can talk a little bit about what to do, how to prepare if you're going into the salary negotiation or waiting for an offer. Because again, every salary doesn't mean you negotiate. So if you were new to the job, if you're on the job hunt and you're getting your offer. So, I mean, it's so hard because people talk about market value. And as I hopefully shared, there is really no market value because it's so specific to every company. So you might be like, generally for most companies, my years of experience were doing the job that I have that years of experience in would be worth kind of, a 10 to probably 20, maybe 30K range, depending on how much money that company has. Do they overpay and overwork? Do they just overpay to be a really great employer? Like all those things. So knowing your market value is not a bad thing. And I'd encourage you to do your best to find out what that is. It's obviously a little bit easier if you I'm a marketing manager with 7 years experience, right? That's a little bit easier than someone who's had a really winding career path. That can be really, really hard. The other thing I think is important, especially as you move on in your career, is just honor kind of what you need, what's worth your time, and putting that out there in the market to see if someone's willing to pay you. So oftentimes when I do interviews, I'll say, what are your salary expectations? And everyone goes, oh, well, I don't know, depends on the job. And what's your budget? And they try to kind of turn it back on me. But the bottom line is, if I only have $80,000 to pay and you're at a point in your career or you were expecting $120,000, we shouldn't continue the interview process if we're that far off on salary. And that's kind of another behind the curtain thing. It's just, I say to employers when I do this talks for entrepreneurs about how to hire, I always say, don't test drive the Ferrari if your budget gives you the Ford, because you're going to like the Ferrari. You're always going to like the person more. My manager is going to like the person more who wants $120,000 a year because likely they have more experience. But we have deemed that we only have $80,000 to spend on this position, and that the experience level we assume someone who's asking for $80,000 brings is enough to do the position. Yes, if you have more experience, you could obviously do the position, but I don't need that experience necessarily day one in the role. I can grow that person maybe. And I also don't have the money to pay for it. So that's kind of why they ask about salary. So you do want to know your market value, and you want to know what that bottom line is for you. So I will say to people when they hesitate or can't answer the question or give me anywhere from 50 to 100,000 is fine with me. So I often say, what is your bottom line? Especially when you're later in your career. At the beginning of your career, a little bit more tricky. Because like I said, the offer is a little bit more standard, but someone mentioned they're coming back after 20 years experience. So right now, most people in this room, I'm going to make the assumption, wouldn't necessarily take a job for minimum wage if we didn't have to. We'll do what we have to do to survive, yada, yada. But for the most part, minimum wage would be a tough thing to get out of bed for every morning. So we all have a bottom line. And that number increases as we get more experience and get older. So right now, if I were to take a new job or get a job offer, I do have a number that I need to make to, one, deem it worth my time to go and make. Now, obviously, if I'm super passionate or something about the project, that number might be flexible, but there's a pretty clear bottom line. And knowing what your bottom line is really important. And I'll often position the question, and you can flip it on its head if you're answering the question. And I say, hey, what's your bottom line? What are you most comfortable? And where were you hoping to grow in the next 12 to 18 months is what I'll say to the candidate. And you can answer the same question when you're giving your salary expectations as a job seeker. So know your bottom line. You know what? It'd be really hard for me to take less than X amount. Ideally, I'm most comfortable and my understanding of market value is Y to Z. And I'd like to grow or be at A and B within the next 12 to 18 months. And it just gives a really lovely way to answer the question. It also lets an employer know your overall range. And as a manager and HR person, I love it because if all I have is $80,000 today, and you tell me you want to be at 120 in 12 to 18 months, but you're okay taking 80 today, it gives me a chance to be a good employer and know that's where you want to get to and be honest with my managers about whether we can get you there. And then I can also just allows that conversation to be so much better where I already kind of knew where you want to be in 12 to 18 months. So fast forward 12 to 18 months from now, things are in a good place to have that discussion. I've made it easier for you, you've made it easier for me, and it just works better that way. Yeah. So now I really will pause.
No, good stuff. Thanks for sharing the behind the scenes for a lot of these kind of things.
Yeah.
Any questions from anyone? Or I can also just jump in at any time as well to make my comments too. Again, it's probably quickest to just come off mute if you have a question. Or if you want to, if you have a problem with your mic or any technical issues, you can just type in the chat box and I will read it out as well. One of my quick observations is I really love how you talked about it as a business transaction. Because I think at the end of the day, a lot of people make it so personal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a discussion about what my worth is. It's more about how can I add value in my role. So if you make the discussion and you focus it more on them rather than on you, it takes a lot of pressure both off you as well psychologically, because you don't have to think it's all personal. And it's more about how can you actually justify the value that you're bringing or adding to the table.
Yeah. And I think it's just also like just really understanding that it's not it's about your role and the work that you do, and that has different value to businesses at different times, and that can change over the course of your employment. You know, for if you, especially if you go places for a long period of time, you've been there for 10 years, the first 5 years you might have been, you know, so valuable and instrumental in growing a department and bringing expertise or training other people. And there's this concept called work yourself out of a job, right? So if you set up career services, I kind of did it, right? I set up this whole department. It was just me hustling across Canada for the first couple of years. I hired a couple people, and then I put processes and things in place. There were 7 people across Canada doing the day-to-day of the job. And yes, it allowed me to do other things, but it also, quite frankly, I didn't want to be doing other things. The things that became what the business needed from me at the salary and level they were paying me as a director was no longer aligned with my career the same way as doing the thing. So I had kind of worked myself out of a job, and I gained a ton of experience along the way at Lighthouse, and still talk to them all. Like, I'm a shareholder and an advisor, and still I'm super involved in their success. But yeah, my skill set became less different value as I grew a department. So it's kind of a fun double-edged sword when you work yourself out of a job. And sometimes it leads to really exciting things. There could have been other opportunities at Lighthouse that I could have pursued that just didn't align. But it also gave me the opportunity to get back into HR in a nice kind of wrap it all up in a great way.
Question for Amy. Is it okay to ask the salary range upfront? Or actually, she has been asked by a company recruiter what my salary needs are in the screening phone call.
Yeah, so yes, you can always ask for the salary range up front. They may or may not tell you. And the reason they don't tell you is psychological. So if the salary position is $60,000 to $80,000, say that's the range I have as a budget, and you were expecting, you would have been happy with 65. You're like, I want $65,000. We're perfectly matched for this job, for the skills you're coming to the table and you're asking. But if I say that the job will pay up to 80 based on your experience, especially early in the interview process when I'm not really sure about your level and I'm still assessing your skills compared to what I expect at 80 versus 60, that kind of thing, you're automatically going to feel underpaid when I make you that job offer because you knew I had $80,000 to spend. So I don't ever tell that range because you know, it's relative to where you kind of land on my assessment of the skills you're bringing to the table. Because someone with 60,000, I expect less from them straight up on day one than someone at 80,000. So I usually won't tell. I usually then flip it back on you and ask, but you can ask. Some people might. And job postings, actually, some job postings make you put it. Most employers will do a very large range. And I'll just say that if you do see that range, understand that the employer expects something different for 80,000 than they do at 60. So if they only offer you 70, it's not that they want to underpay you or jerk you around. They just were like, oh, they're assessing what you showed in the interview process. That's the only information we have. A resume of your past experience, how you talked to us and presented yourself in the interview process is the only information I have to make a decision on whether to pay you 60 or 80. If there's like a skill set thing there. And then the question was, recruiters ask in the screening? Yes, 100%. I ask too. It's again that what is your don't test drive the Ferrari if all you can afford is the Ford. I need to know what you're looking for to know if we're on the same page. And a recruiting agency will need to know what you're looking for so that they can put you in front of the right client. If you want $80,000 and a client only wants to pay 60, they're not going to put you forward for that opportunity, which is another reason I like to answer the question of what's your bottom line, where do you want to be and where you're most comfortable, because it actually opens up more opportunities and you won't get kind of weeded out. And then also that's why I'm not a huge fan of the people who play games for negotiating, because I feel you can play games and lose opportunities as much as maybe those games will win. So yeah, those are the kind of things. And her positioning or him positioning that question of what do you need is just a nicer way to ask what your salary expectations are. I wouldn't attach any meaning to the words they chose.
Great.
Good question.
Any other questions? Cool. I think we can move on.
All right. So we're coming up to the interactive component of my presentation now that I've given you a ton of information. Great. So how to ask for the raise. All right. I've just told everyone, I do have a slide after this, but given that we've all learned what it means to a business, how to prepare in asking for a raise, does anyone want to be super brave and unmute and talk me through what those bullet points are on my next slide about how to ask for a raise? And it's okay if everyone's feeling a little quiet and shy tonight.
Are you looking for actual words that people would say, or just
talk me through the process? How would you approach it? Given we've kind of finished the learning part. We know how to prepare. We know we know what a raise means. How would you ask for it if you had to ask for a raise tomorrow? If I lost internet connection today, how would you approach it?
I haven't had. I'm self-employed right now, so I haven't had the need to kind of navigate the conversation. But if I were in a company, first thing I would do is I think based on my understanding of everything that you shared, I wouldn't make it a surprise. So I would bring up the conversation early so that the manager or the HR person knows that this is something that's coming down the pipeline, so that they can start to plan for it on the other end as well. So I might say something along the lines, it really depends on where I feel I'm most justified. So either in one of those three areas where I think I've either exceeded my target or my role has evolved beyond what it is. I forgot what the third one was, but I think that's kind of the angle I would take. So usually I find myself in positions where I work myself out of a job, exactly like you. So my role typically changes quite a lot, and that's how I would probably justify it. I'd say, hey, you know what? I was hired to do this. This was my starting salary. Things have evolved quite a bit, so I love to bring up a discussion where we can revisit our compensation. So that's probably how I would just rate it.
That's perfect. Yeah. So basically the summary, all the preparation makes asking really easy, right? So get curious and prepare. So Chin, you mentioned you would ask early. So absolutely. If you know the reviews are coming up in April, there's nothing wrong, especially if you've been there a little while. Like maybe if you're day one of the job, not be like, hi, I plan on asking for a raise in 2 months time. But if you've been there a while, just be like, hey, I just want to give a heads up that I know we have reviews coming up in April. I'd like to use that time to discuss my salary or my position. That gives great context for the HR person. I can tell you right now, like those conversations happen in the back room of like, okay, who's really gunning for their salary increase this year? Who's feeling that they deserve it? Who's feeling they deserve it and do deserve it? And then frankly, who's feeling they deserve it and don't deserve it? And the management has to kind of prepare for those conversations. So that's absolutely perfect. And then, like I said, I heard you prepare and present your business case. So saying that my job's really changed or I've taken on more, and I'd like to talk about it. So again, it doesn't have to be some big formal PowerPoint presentation about that. It can be a simple conversation. And a lot of it depends on your company and the formality around that, your relationship with your manager. But as a manager, it can just be as simple as, hey, I feel like my role's changed a lot. I'd really like to just talk about it. I'd like to understand how compensation works here, those kind of conversations. And then on the flip side, like I said, if you're kind of going in where like, I have no clue what my business case is, or even if I have one, going in and having that conversation about, hey, I'd like to just understand how I can be ready for a promotion or raise come April, or, I just curious what that looks like. So yeah, so doing all the things in the preparation is essentially the conversation you need to have. And it makes that conversation so much faster, more concise, more easy. And the hope, again, when you have an understanding of the context of what salary means at the company, and then you spend the time getting to know the processes and how salary works at the company and asking those questions, it should be really easy to go from preparing to just asking for the raise and be less emotional, and you'll feel more prepared and be more business orientated about it. So that was kind of the hope there. Again, what do you do when you don't get what you want? So I tried to be a little bit cheeky here and put it back on y'all to just give me your thoughts on what you would do. Does anyone want to take a stab at what they're going to do? Jay's getting ready to ask for to negotiate on his offer. Any thoughts on what you're going to do if they say no or don't give you what you want? Anyone? Again, you can all be shy. I know I'm putting people on the spot here. I wasn't sure what the audience would be like.
I'd love to hear from the audience as well.
Anyone want to be brave? Oh, Amy's off mute.
Hi. What are they? I know. What do you do? This is like a big, it's like, what if they say no?
Yeah.
But I spend so much time psyching myself up, when I have to ask for an increase.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what if they say no?
So any thoughts?
I guess sometimes they might say that it's like just not in our budget for this year. We can look at it, going forward, which is where your point to like preparing for the conversation, makes it easier to hear
Absolutely.
about like how does compensation work at a company. So, yeah,
Cool.
I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I do have another slide. Yeah, so basically, actually, you'll notice this slide is exactly the same slide that we talked about when you don't have a business case, when you're kind of going in blind and going, I just know I want to grow my career and I know I want to make more money and I don't know how to do that. So it's doing the same thing. So if you hear no, or you don't get what you wanted, $10,000 raise, or you wanted this title and you didn't get it, again, the best thing you can do is just get curious about why. So ask how you can grow in your position. What does that role look like? You want 100K, you want 50K, whatever that is, you want that title. What does that look like in that company, in the department, experience wise, skills wise? And a good employer will be honest with you, even if, quite frankly, you're not going to achieve that at the company. And that's another thing culturally that I'm so against, that we live in this world, and it's a little bit less in tech because people job hop around a little bit more. But it's okay that a company no longer serves you, and it's okay that you took, you worked 1 year, you worked 3 years. I worked 5 years at Lighthouse Labs, and it was the best 5 years of my career to date. I long for those times in some respects so much, but it's just the time had come to move on. What they could offer me was no longer aligned where my career wanted to go, both financially and position wise. So, asking those questions. Then get feedback also. If you get a no, especially like, no, you're not ready to be a manager, or no, we're not paying you 100 grand. Okay, awesome. Why? And be honest with yourself. That's the other thing is, sadly, some of the people who come asking for raises, they aren't necessarily the people that have the best track record of being performance people. They often are, you kind of wonder if if they've been getting the feedback that their managers have been giving them, because they feel they come across as entitled, and you're just like, okay, like, did you not remember the performance improvement plan you were on 2 months ago, and now you're asking me for a raise? Like, maybe we take one step at a time here. So, be honest with yourself, but then also ask for that feedback. And when people give critical feedback, it's such a gift. It's so easy to not give critical feedback. It's so easy just to like go, oh yeah, everything's fine. No, you're okay. You're good. You'll get there. That's the easy answer that a manager can give. And especially if they're an inexperienced manager. So if somebody says to you, yeah, you know what, to be honest, this needs work, or your numbers last quarter kind of sucked, or you hit your numbers, but the team didn't really love the way you approached it, or you really, your skills on X, Y, and Z just aren't really where they would need to be to earn 80,000, or at our company, 100,000 really is managing people. And right now, I don't think you're ready for that. Those kind of feedbacks are gold, and you can ask for that kind of stuff. And if you get it, just make sure you accept it as gracious as you can, because it's so much easier just to blow smoke up your butts. Yeah. And then also, again, like, don't be afraid to kind of get curious again in that initial way of just like, hey, like, I'm just curious, like, I understand, or can you tell me a little bit about why I'm not being accepted? And then, and what do I need to do to get where I want to go? And what does that look like here at this company? How far can I get with this company? What does that all look like? What do I need to work on? So yeah, so that slide of what to do when you want to ask for a raise and you don't really have a business case almost becomes your fallback to when you get told no, or you don't get the money that you want, and just get curious and ask those questions and get all those honest answers. And part of it is you just understanding what that business can give you in your career, both experience wise as well as financially, so you can make the right decisions in your career now and in the future. And it's okay that a company can't give you what you need anymore. And I actually, like, a lot of Silicon Valley companies, they do embrace that mentality that change is okay. And if anyone's interested in that line of thinking, I'd really recommend the book Powerful, which is all about the next Netflix culture. Patty McClure, I think is her name. She pretty much is like my HR gal these days. I love her approach and how she thinks through those things. And they talk a lot about that culture of changing businesses and the changing business needs, and how that may or may not serve your career goals or aspirations as time goes. Cool. All right. Wait, shouldn't I go get another offer and come back to my current employer and show them I'm worth it somewhere else so they'll give me a raise? Ooh, the competing offer. So essentially, this is a slippery slope. You can, sure, you can go shop around, and honestly, if you're at the point of leaving, I would say you probably should have asked for the raise first, and then when you got no, maybe shop around, because if you didn't ask, you don't even know if you get a no. You can always make money somewhere else. If all you're doing is finding a job that pays better, you're going to find it. So the question I have for people that want to do that, or when they say to do that as a leverage point, is, are you willing to leave the company? And maybe should you be leaving anyways? Because I promise you can go find more money somewhere else. So you might not get on the first interview, like the first, depending on how they are market value. If you're in one of those companies that overpay and overwork, then you're probably not going to get more money, but you just get a better job. So, you can. I think if you did do that and you really didn't want to leave your job, and it was really about money and your personal kind of financial situation had changed or something, I think you just have to approach it in a very human way. And I think before you go, you have to decide if you want to stay with that company or not. I think it's a bad idea to just go, so-and-so is going to give me this much money. Are you going to match it? Well, my answer is no. My answer is like, cool. Are you giving me your resignation? So, but I have had situations where an employee approached me in tears, said to me that they didn't ask for a raise. They didn't, and they assumed that they couldn't because reviews weren't until April and it was December. So, they honestly didn't have the information. They didn't ask for the information, but they made assumptions. They didn't ask for a raise. Their financial situation had changed, or somebody had reached out to them and they took the interviews, as you do, and they ended up with an offer on their lap that they hadn't really tried that hard to get. And they were really conflicted because the offer was $10,000 more. And they really didn't want to leave the company, but they're like, how do I turn down $10,000 more with my family and blah, blah, blah. And we did offer her the $10,000. It was something that the leadership team really, so a couple jobs ago, the leadership team really hummed and hawed over, because we didn't want to set a precedent and we didn't want to set that culture. That's not a culture I want to encourage in HR, that you just go find another job offer and we'll just give in to whatever demands, so to speak, and throw all of our internal equity and pay comp strategy out the door. But we did give her that amount, but she came from such a human place of, like I said, she hadn't asked if there was an exception to the review process rules, hadn't shared that, she was feeling undervalued, hadn't asked those get curious questions that I mentioned. And like I said, she didn't really try that hard for a job interview. It kind of happened. And so it can go in your favor. More likely than not, it's going to just piss off your employer, because you've probably gone off on work hours for 3 or 4 interviews. It's kind of like, where's this coming from? If they're going to be blindsided by it, I think you've way less. Maybe if, you have a really great relationship with your manager, and kind of like this woman, you were really well respected and it might work for you. But I think if you're doing that, you probably should just accept the other offer and leave. Cool. Awesome. So like I said, a couple kind of closing points to just remember. So you can likely always make more money somewhere else. That's just the truth. And straight up, I mean, as an employer, I hope there's no one from CTO.ai listening, but you often do make more money jumping jobs than staying. It's just the fact. It's really hard for an employer to give you a $15,000 raise. If they have any cash issues, internal equity, that's a really hard thing to do unless there's like a clear promotion and then you're moving into a new salary chunk. It's really easy for a new employer to give you $15,000 more. So you generally make more money jumping job to job than staying with one job, generally, not always. But so, if money is what you're motivated by, you can always make more money somewhere else. And then also, just understand that money means different things at different points in our lives. And it's okay to be money motivated. I know that sometimes employers are like, well, they're not in for the right things. And it's okay to be money motivated. If you are, then you can probably make the money you want to make. Also, when I was young and didn't have a mortgage and single, I could work jobs that were just really cool or amazing experience. I have a family now and a mortgage and a husband who may or may not have a job in COVID. So my choices are different right now. Money and salary plays a different role in my life than it did 10 years ago. And that's okay. And hopefully, it'll play a different role in my life 10 years from now. And I'll have more financial freedom to not have to hit a certain salary mark to kind of feel like I can, do a job and spend my time where I need to spend it. So just remember to factor all the things in your negotiations and in your consideration, and to have a professional conversation with your current employer to see what the options are. Because like that woman who came to me in tears, to be honest, if she had really asked, I assume we probably could have done something for her, or at least given her, she might have had to wait to the review period, but we probably would have done a lot to retain her, and she probably would have saved herself a lot of sleepless nights going out and getting that job to just end up staying where we are. And I wasn't down, the relationship wasn't damaged between me and her because I had that real genuine conversation with her. But I know the CFO, who didn't talk to her, didn't really know her, was a little bit annoyed by it and was couldn't understand why she couldn't have just come straight to us. So there's always those kind of risks and stuff too. All right. I mean, that's it for me. I wanted to leave lots of time for questions, and I assume there's lots of those what if scenarios in this kind of topic. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you for sharing transparently and honestly. Really appreciate it. And Amy saying thank you as well. Thank you for the perspective from company comm strategy point of view.
I really appreciate your this presentation. Thank you so much.
Good, thank you. Thanks for coming out tonight.
Any questions or other comments, or I have a few as well.
Yeah.
On my end, just a quick reminder, and I think this applies to whether or not you're looking for a job and being hired at a new company, or whether you're already in the company and you're negotiating a salary. Do remember at the end of the day as well, most discussions around salary are not just single interactions. It's not just like take it or leave it, you get this number or not. It really depends on your motivation to work with the company as well. So you have to sometimes in certain cases be willing to flex depending on if it's worth for you, and like Charlene mentioning, understanding what your baseline is so that you can understand what is too low or what is possible. But if you really, really enjoy or really respect a company and really want to work for them, then you have to be willing to put it out there and make it more of a collaborative process. Don't just say like, hey, it's not about you versus them. It's about how can we work together? Like, this is what I'm willing to do for this much. Like, can we kind of negotiate something? So you have to be willing to make it a discussion and more of a collaborative process as well. And same thing.
Yeah, and I'll quickly share. So at Lighthouse Labs, actually, when I first joined, because I loved what they did, and Grow Lab, the accelerator I was working for, had merged. So I was jobless. I needed a job. That merger had happened. And, when I approached Jeremy at Lighthouse Labs, I was like, love what you do. And he's like, love you. Would you want to set this program up for us? And it was this big, excited conversation. And he came back to me with the contract, and the number was below my bottom line. It just was. And I was like, oh, and I knew they had money. Like I knew they had profitable, or they weren't profitable. They were revenue positive. So I pushed back and I was like, hey, this is really my bottom line. I love what you guys do. I can't go for much lower than this. I just really can't. Like, how can we make it work? And we actually negotiated that I worked 4 days a week to start. So I worked 4 days a week for the first year, because what that allowed me to do is they paid me what they could pay me for the position. And it was a risk, right? They didn't know their year one of the company. And it allowed me to have an extra 8 to 10 hours a week to hustle and do some side contracts and some side projects that let me bring my salary back up to where I needed it to be. And then also, to be honest, like, it was a way easier conversation when I was kind of sick of that and wanted 5 days a week, because I'd already worked there a year and a half, and I could be a little bit more upfront and have a little bit more weight behind my negotiation to say, like, listen, I don't want to be piecemealing my salary anymore. I want to just commit to you guys and dive head in and use that extra 8 to 10 hours a week to really make a difference here, because I'm kind of doing that time anyways. And, it's a much more powerful position because I'd been there for a year and a half and had done a bunch of work for them. So for them to potentially lose me, not saying that it would have ever come to that, but I was getting very uncomfortable with our arrangement. They were a little bit more motivated to find a way to bring me on board full time. And there was a conversation about that. There was a conversation about job opportunity and where I'd spend that 8 hours and some increased responsibility and stuff. But ultimately, we able to make it work. So I also advise the Lighthouse Lab students, when you first take the job, you are in a much stronger position to negotiate once you're already proven your skills experience. So even at the 3-month mark. So again, asking, when can I review my salary? What's the appropriate time? Can we review it in 3 months? If they're offering lower than what you want, but you either want the job and or straight up, you might be in a situation where you need the job. So asking if you can talk about it again at the 3-month mark, it's just way easier to present a business case since you've been there for 3 months, as opposed, and also then you can honestly be honest with yourself and be like, whoop, yep, didn't really hit the ground running as much as I thought I did. So maybe I need to get some feedback and grow before I kind of go in with my demands again, so to speak.
One other comment, and then I'll read out Jay's question as well, or comments. The other thing to remember is if you're already in the company and you're bringing up the salary conversation, is that at the end, whether or not you get it, you're still at the company. So unless you want to lose your job, like Charlie mentioned, you have to be amiable with how you discuss it as well. So make sure that you're professional, make sure that you don't give up the wrong signals. You know, that was a really interesting one, like bringing up another offer. Like if you are showing that, you're giving them the signal that you don't really care about them and it's just about the money, right? So make sure that you're mindful of that. And then if you do get it, also remember that when you do get a promotion or a raise, expectations will be higher the other end as well, especially from your manager. So you better be able to step up your game as well. Don't just expect to be doing the exact same thing that you're doing right now if you get a raise, right?
I will also say if you negotiate really heavy in the interview process and you push above their comfort level, I definitely have had situations where, you know, we were desperate to hire someone. We were desperate to hire someone with that skill set, and they really pushed me above what I was comfortable paying from a salary perspective. My expectations for that person were higher. They just straight up were. And the manager's expectations were, because, you know, we wanted to bring them in at 70. They really negotiated hard for 80, and good for them. But I expect $80,000 a year of a performance then. You know, and I say that a lot to junior people, a lot of the folks at Lighthouse Labs, I say, you know, when you're learning, you're switching jobs. So I think it was Amy, you're getting back in the career thing after 20 years. You might want to give yourself a little bit of set yourself up to be a rock star, you know, versus negotiating super hard on day one and then maybe not living to expectations. And there's a balance there, because also, like, you know, did you talk yourself out of money for the long term? Because it's hard to get that money back in raises. You're talking $10,000, $15,000, but just be mindful when you negotiate really hard to, even at the early stages, the expectation rises. Because again, it's exchange for services. You just said your service is more expensive, so I expect better quality service, right? The same as if I hired a contractor, a painter to paint my house. I'm going to have different expectations for the $20 hour painter to paint my house than the $100 hour painter to paint my house. I'm going to be a little bit more patient with some nicks on the roof or, you know, something on the carpet.
Yeah. Comment from Jay, my promotion was offered as a raise on my salary negotiated 3 years ago when we won a much lower pay scale. Mm-hmm. New employees are joining on a much higher pay scale since we have quadrupled in size over the years. How do you deal with company valuing you based on what salaries you have accepted in the past? Maybe I'll stop there, and then there's another comment, but I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, that's exactly that salary compression that I kind of talked about, and that happened. So, I mean, you've just armed yourself with some information. And I think the best thing you can do is get really curious and be really upfront and be really professional. I would question about how do you know what other people make? If you know because you're involved, like it's public and it's kind of not a really hard guess that you know, then cool. It's a little bit dangerous when you play I talk to other people. It can kind of come off in the wrong tone. So if you can kind of leverage in a professional way that you know and you should know, then new pay scale raise, probably perfect. That's easy for you then. Then you can kind of go, and again, it's from that curious place and that place of wanting to make the relationship work. So go, hey, it's awkward for me. I really appreciate genuine people. It's really awkward for me. I'm not sure how to bring this up, but kind of here's the deal. Like when I started, the company's a different place. I know pay has been adjusted and things, and now it's like clear that people with less experience are making more. How do I get there? What does that look like, the company, to get me up to where I think I should be, which is X, Y, and Z? And again, if you kind of come from that place of like, it's not pay me now or I'm out the door, but I've identified this problem. I'm being honest with you where I'm at, because it's really hard for me to work every day and have that. So I think if you can bring a genuineness to your conversation, doesn't have to be all business. It's just avoid that really emotional, like extreme emotions that people often get with the salary. I think that's a fair conversation to be having. And, you know, they've been kind of lucky that you haven't had it yet, to be totally honest. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised when you have it. I would be like, oh my gosh, Jay's going to be in my office any day now, given that that's the reality.
Yeah. The follow-up comment from Jay, we also had no comp strategy before, as we just hired a HR manager last week. When asked how they would do the raise, the answer was, we don't know. Fast forward to today's offer letter, which they asked me to sign immediately. I don't know if there's any extra comments on that.
yes, I guess, is the offer letter they've asked you to sign immediately the raise you wanted, or you still want to talk about the raise? This is the question.
Wanted to have a negotiation.
Yeah, then I mean, I think you can ask. I think it's asking for the conversation in a right way. So you'd be like, you know, appreciate the offer. Like, it sounds like you got a raise. And you can be like, hey, awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Again, I just want to let it be known that I had expected Y and you're offering me X. And, you know, like it's fair if you're kind of giving them grace that you don't necessarily expect it all to be corrected once, because you understand how budgets work and you understand there's probably several people in your position and there's this new HR person doing their best to come up with a plan to fix everyone's salary because they obviously have a problem they need to solve, and you're willing to kind of be patient, but you're just asking for timelines. You're just asking for what that looks like. Again, getting curious on what that process could look like. And then if ultimately at the end of the day they're saying to you, this is all we can pay you, and you know other people are making more, I would kind of be wondering what they think of your performance and be really honest with yourself. I mean, you know, companies generally, like if they're really starting to drag their feet after those kind of conversations, then I don't know, you might want to kind of up the ante a little bit. You might want to kind of say, hey, listen, like this is really frustrating for me. Is my performance an issue? Should I be working on something? Like, I'm just not really understanding, because that's their job to tell you the process, right? It's not their job to immediately pay you what you want today, but it's their job to tell you what that looks like and how and what you can do to fix that kind of stuff and how you can improve and what growth looks like for you salary wise. So I'd start asking some tough questions, but again, ask questions, get curious.
And I don't know if this is the exact situation, but one example of how you could possibly phrase it might be along the lines of, you know, I've been at the company for 4 years now, and I see that right now you're paying new employees at this level. And because I've been around longer, I've been performing well, assuming you've been performing well, that you think you're justified for a higher level, and I'm assuming that maybe the offer is only just like slightly above what new employees are getting. Then maybe that's where you can say, you know, I was hoping for a bit more. That's at least how I would word it. I was hoping for a bit more. I'd love to discuss a bit more and kind of understand how we can kind of work that out. Yeah. Amy was asking, is it okay to ask about raises in the interview process towards the end?
No. It's, I mean, I'd always say, why are you asking, right? Are you asking, is that the deal breaker? If how they approach their comp strategy, the yes or no, whether you accept an offer, I would do that when there's an offer. I always tell everyone the best time to ask the really hard questions and the best time to potentially negotiate is when you have an offer in front of you, because they've told you, we really like you better than other candidates. Now, again, you got to be careful. There could be it could have been a really tough decision between two candidates, but when there's a piece of paper in front of you saying, please come join us, please, we really like you, it gets a little bit easier to ask the tough questions, and it gets harder for them to walk away from you without either addressing them or potentially giving in. You have more leverage at that point. Yeah, I'd say that's kind of day one stuff of like, how do you do raises? Unless you didn't get what you wanted from the offer, and then I would again ask the question before I sign the offer of like, okay, cool, like I really wanted 50, you've offered 45, you know, and they'll give you whatever answer they give you, and then just go, awesome. So when would be the appropriate time for us to revisit my salary? What does that look like at the company? And do all that again before you sign the piece of paper. And again, it tees up the conversation really nicely for 3 or 6 months or even 1 year down the road when that's the appropriate time to talk.
All right. Any other final questions, comments? Or if not, I will wrap up with some follow-up information.
Great questions, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Maybe I'll just quickly go through some follow-up. So thanks everyone for joining. Hope you all enjoyed the session. Number one, like I mentioned, the session is recorded. And if you want the slides, just shoot me an email and I will send you the recording. The link is going to be posted to YouTube, and I'll also have Charlene send me the slides if she's okay with that.
Yep.
But otherwise, we have some other upcoming workshops coming up. So on sales automation, writing sales emails, another one on innovation, you know, how to pitch, how to find your ideal co-founder. So all of that is coming up. The last week of September is Vancouver Startup Week. So if you're in Vancouver in the startup scene and you want to check it out, then you can find more information on their website as well, Vancouver Startup Week. This is the details for the Do Good Business Challenge that I mentioned. So again, if you have any ideas around supporting retail related businesses, definitely check it out. And yeah, here's my contact info. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also connect with Charlene on LinkedIn as well. And I think that's it.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And
Thank
that
you
is
so
it.
much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, both of Jen and Charlene. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Glad it was valuable
Good
for
luck.
you.
Yeah, good luck on the job hunt. LinkedIn me if you want.
Okay,
Thank you so
great.
much. Yeah, good night.